请扶稳行李，紧握扶手，注意脚下安全。
Hello, my
Please
name's
watch
Mike
your
Donahue,
luggages.
and
Hold the handrail.
I'm here with Maggie Bell. We're both students in CTSE, some numbers class. What are the numbers again?
60
Like
20 for us.
60, 20. Yes. Yeah, there's numbers. And we're doing a podcast on ELL students and part of a podcast series that we're doing on teaching ELA, English Language Arts, for our secondary students. And I've been a teacher since 2014, however many years that is now. And I taught ELL students in the classroom for about 7 years in there. And then I also have tutored ELL students online. Did that as a part-time gig for a couple of years. And then and when I was in college, I also tutored some ELL students. So, and spent a little bit of time in some other countries and was able to do some ELL tutoring there as well, in the UK and in Canada. So, super fun topic for me to talk about. And Maggie, what's your experience? All this.
Again, I'm Maggie Bell. I'm a second year master's student in Auburn University's English department, studying rhetoric and composition. So I teach first year writing, where I have several non-native English speakers in my class that I'm working with. And then I'm also a certified ESL teacher that I do some volunteer work with in the Auburn community.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're going to be teaching ELA at any level, you're going to be, or if you're teaching anything, you're gonna have ELL students in your class at some level at some point. So I think it's definitely a pertinent discussion for any educator out there. So we've got some questions we're going to be going through in this podcast. The first one is, how do you teach ELLs if you don't know their language? And a lot of people have asked me this when they found out I was like teaching ELL at school or something. They're like, "Oh, do you know another language?" And I'm like, kinda. I got a minor in Greek. I still have yet to teach a Greek student.
That's so funny. My minor is also in Greek.
Is it really? Are
Yeah.
you kidding? Did you do classical Greek or Koine Greek, or
I
what kind of
did
Greek?
Koine Greek.
So did
Yeah.
I. Nice. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a
Never used it in the
pre-preliminary.
real world
Right. Yeah, you can't.
teaching
It's
though.
not spoken anymore. But I would say that it was helpful for me to understand language better. Like, even though I'm
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
speaking Greek, I understanding the grammar. And that's one thing I've noticed a lot with ELL students too, that they understand grammar. They
Absolutely.
typically
Yeah.
have a good grasp of like what conjunctions are. And that's how they're learning English before they get to the US. A lot of students that come in to the US from other countries already have several years, sometimes a lot of years of English under their belt.
Right.
And sometimes we're just helping them kind of like get a little bit more fluent or help them with some academic English. So yeah, it's almost every ELL student I've taught had some basic understanding of English. Now, with the students that don't, I've had students come from all types of countries. It's crazy because some kids had come from China with like, they've been doing English since kindergarten, and then
Yeah.
other kids I've had from China that for whatever reason hadn't had. So it's really not that different than in the US. Some US kids are going to
Yeah,
have
for sure.
a whole bunch of Spanish, and some of them, aren't going to have any, or some have a little. So there's different reasons why, I guess. I don't know, who knows all the reasons, but some people will have a lot of English and some people won't have had
Yeah,
any.
and I would say too, just like my experience learning Greek and Latin, through the high school, my undergrad years, things like that. I don't know that I would have as good of a grasp of English grammar and even an ability to teach that without having practiced a little bit with learning other languages. So even though I don't know the languages of my students necessarily that I'm working with, just having a basic concept of how languages work, how grammar works, is important, I think, to be successful working with ESL students.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the little Spanish that I do know, I've had more Spanish speaking students than probably any other
Right.
demographic. And the little bit I know that I can use is very helpful. And
Yeah.
then, but not so much. Oh, it's funny because it's my Spanish is muy mal. It's terrible, but it's enough to at least break the ice and be friendly. And that's probably
Right.
where I've used it the most. Other than that, we're using other apps and like the Google Translate's amazing. Uh,
Absolutely.
that you can use that to talk to students. And, I used it today in class. I had a student.
Yeah.
She's a French speaker, um, and is here for about a year with her family. Her dad's in school, and she's her English is really good. She's a very well-spoken, student, but there's certain words that she won't understand. And so it was funny because the words that she asked about a word, it was diary, and I translate it, and in French it's just journal. I mean, now
Oh,
they
yeah.
pronounce it slightly differently, but I was like, oh, it's the journal.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, yeah. So it's kind of funny when we translate words and they're so similar in some other languages. But yeah,
Yeah.
Google Translate's amazing.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it's important to like for anyone, that may be nervous about having ESL students in their classroom, or maybe this is your first experience with someone who's not a native English speaker. What's most valuable for them is that you're helping them immerse in English as well.
mhm,
And so, again, Google Translate, any tools like that that are helpful for just overcoming some of the vocabulary differences are amazing, but for the most part, like our job is to present them with like an opportunity to immerse themselves in English because that's the way they're going to be able to learn English the
mhm.
fastest.
Yeah, and when I did the tutoring online, especially, those were mostly early beginner English speakers, children that were younger. They were
Right.
usually between the ages of like 7 and 10, and their parents were really just paying for me to talk to their kids. That was the main thing. We would read, work on pronunciation and stuff like that, but the main thing they wanted was just to have a conversation with someone in that language,
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
that they could work on their grammar a little bit and their reading skills. But most of it was just, yeah, like you were saying, immersion is
Yeah.
super important.
Yeah, well, Mike, of course you have a bit more, actually a lot more classroom experience than I have. What challenges have you kind of seen in the classroom, working with non-native English speakers? What do you think? Again, we're kind of talking in this class about barriers to like equity in education and how to overcome those. So, again, just kind of what challenges have you seen in the classroom, and maybe what are some ways that you've been able to help students overcome those?
Yeah. And you have that broad range of English speakers, like we are already talking about, where some are early, some are kind of intermediate level, and some are like totally fluent and maybe just need it, a little bit of help here and there. So, especially when I've had students come in with no English background, I always try to find them resources in their native language. Like that's
Yeah.
huge. If you can get them something, been able to get them books in class in Hindi, in Spanish, in Mandarin, a whole bunch of different languages. And what I found out was our school had funds set aside for that. Like
Uh,
there is money out there for these students to have those books. So you just have to know who to ask, really. So we had a really great ELL coordinator, and I would just let her know, if we had a new student, like, hey, there's this student and he needs this language or she needs this language or whatever. And they would usually be able to get me the book that we were reading in class in that student's language. And I think that was super helpful. Just shows that you're putting out effort, that they're valuable, that you've gone out of your way
Yeah.
to do that for them. Obviously, we want them to make, as being an English class, to as much as possible make that transition into English. But of course, when they're like just beginning, that's
Yeah, for sure.
to read, because it was an ELL or ELA classroom. We might
Right.
be reading Nathaniel Hawthorne. I wouldn't expect them to be able to figure that out. That'd be a lot for someone who's just like for me to go and try to read Don Quixote in the
Yeah.
original Spanish. I'm just a
Yeah, for
brain
sure.
reading Spanish teacher would be impossible task. So it would be better if it was translated into my language so I could read it and then I could make those translations and stuff. So that's a
Yeah.
big one, to get them the resources they need. Modify assignments as much as possible. Not to simplify it to the point where they're not doing that, but sometimes, I would have them write it out, and then, I mean, Google Translate, we're at an age now where this is just so incredible. They can write something and then put it in Google Translate and translate it over. And then we would work together a little bit on how do we make this a little bit more fluent? Because Google Translate obviously isn't just a one-to-one translator, but it does a lot for you, where then you can talk through, okay, here's some things that we could change in the English, and that helps them practice too with their English and helps them with their, so it's their thinking that was in their language that's now been translated for them, and then we kind of just work on editing it a little bit, and then they could turn in an essay that way, or a short piece of writing, or answering questions on tests. Lots of things they can do through that. And that was
Yeah,
super
absolutely.
helpful.
And like for my classroom, I'm in first year writing at the college level. And so all of my students have basic, proficiency in English in order to attend Auburn and do that. So we're really working more with their writing, I would say, than just like that introduction kind of level that you may be experiencing in some of the, middle grade high school classrooms. And so thinking about writing specifically, they've been able to use artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, a good bit in my classroom to kind of help them overcome some of those linguistic level concerns. Because they're able to like get feedback more focused on their content rather than their grammar. And so again, trying to just introduce them to the idea that like artificial intelligence is great for checking your grammar, for coming up with better words, for doing all of those things so that you and your peers can focus on the content that you're producing and those ideas. And again, just trying to make the language barrier as minimal as possible, whether they're, practicing speaking with their peers in a variety of different classroom spaces, or whether they're actually working through a writing assignment. Just trying to teach them and coach them that their ideas and their content are more important than the grammar and specific vocabulary, because there are, tools like ChatGPT and Google Translate and those things to help them overcome those barriers and instead
Mhm.
just focus on like getting good content and ideas and sharing those out with their peers.
Yeah. And too, with, because I don't automatically know just because I talk to a student where exactly their strengths are with English and where their struggles
Sure.
are
Yeah.
and where they're at. So the WIDA standards are super helpful that all the
Mhm.
schools use in most states. And when they take that test, they all come in and take this test, and they'll give you their score level. So that breaks it into like three main categories of speaking and listening, reading, and then writing. So
Right.
some students will be really good. I mean, their reading and writing is better than mine. Like they're incredible at understanding stuff, but then when it comes to talking, they just haven't practiced it a lot,
Yeah.
uh, or they're just naturally shy for whatever reason, and they won't. So I've had one student, he was so funny. Um, he would not talk. I mean, he would not say a word, but we knew
Yeah.
he understood what we were talking about because he scored so high on the WIDA test, but
Yeah.
he was just frozen with fear over ability to speak English and what he sounded like because he had an accent.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of work. We really worked with him, me and a couple other teachers, to try to break that barrier. And the thing that ended up being the thing that got him talking was him playing on the soccer team.
Yeah.
So once he played on the soccer team and he was making friends and he's talking to these guys, they helped him to learn how to, vocalize more. And then by the
Uh,
time he graduated, he was talking, he was not a outspoken kid. That was naturally, he was just quiet, but he was at least able to talk to the teachers, to have a short conversation and get around. So
yeah.
sometimes it's breaking those barriers that are not like they're able to do it. They don't want to. And some of them will get like I love ChatGPT. I love, using Google Translate and all that, but sometimes they will become overly dependent on those. So there are times then
Yes.
when
Yeah.
I know that their level is getting better, and I'll say, okay, now we're going to do this assignment without your tablet or whatever device they're using to translate,
Right.
to help them get used to just being confident in their own use of English.
So, are there any other just strategies you would recommend for teachers working with non-native English speakers that can help them? Again, just kind of thinking about equity in education and how we can make these students, again, feel confident in their reading and writing skills in ELA classrooms. And just, again, some strategies that teachers may can add into their classroom to be more helpful there.
Yeah. The toughest thing, but I think is the most helpful thing for ELL students is one-on-one instruction or
Yeah,
very small group instruction. If I can, there are some where I've been able to work it out with their schedule and mine, where they could come to me during a planning period or before school or directly after school and work with them.
right. Yeah,
That's the most helpful. Like I think I've seen the best results from being able to do that kind of instruction with those students. It's not always possible.
yeah,
If you can't do that, work it out where you can get them in small groups, have small group work times, and then spend some extra time with that student in their group and try to talk to them. And maybe even if while the other students are working in small groups or something, you can pull that student to the side. I've done that too, where I've brought them over to my desk and we talk through the assignment and just giving them
right.
an opportunity to have a one-on-one discussion with somebody, right?
Yeah,
Because sometimes they'll get in a group and then they'll just kind of hide out in the background. Um, so just trying to get them to talk. Um, but the nice thing about the one-on-one time, if you can get that, or small group, you can have them practice their enunciation, um, have them be able to ask questions that they may not be comfortable asking around other students, um, because they might feel embarrassed or whatever. So that can be a really profitable thing, though, as long as if you can
yeah.
get them to talk. Um,
Yeah, I've used small groups in my classrooms as well, and I've seen it be really successful and impactful for students. And I think too, we read in class this semester Deborah Dean's What Works in Writing Instruction, and again, the overall kind of strategy I got from that book was just to introduce as many different kinds of writing strategies as you can into the classroom, and some will stick for certain students and some won't for other students. And so that's what I've tried to do in small groups is just have them like practice free writing together, practice outlining, practice this strategy, and just giving them, a lot of different tools that may work for them. Because again, knowing that maybe the way they were taught to write in another country or in another context, it may not be the same as, how they're interacting in my classroom. And so finding ways that are both familiar and challenging for them has been really successful with some of my students, like figuring out how they want to write and how they want to bring that into the classroom. Yeah, well, I
but
know that, we have limited time to kind of talk about this as well, but one of the questions I wanted to make sure we touched on was how do you value the students in your classroom and make them feel valued? Um, and I know one of the things that we mentioned in class was just maybe not prioritizing standard American English, especially in writing assignments, recognizing, of course, that students have a right to their own language. And of course, there's tons of scholarship at this point to back that up as well. But again, making sure that they understand that we value their language,
mhm.
and their cultural expertise that they bring in as well, and um, their ability to just like, first of all, learn a new language in the presence of others and like how, challenging and difficult that can be. And just showing again that we value them, that we value the contributions they're making in the classroom, and trying to just support them in that. How have you tried to value some of the students in your classroom and make them feel um, that?
Yeah, one thing we did with the ELL classes that I tried to get as many of them as possible to join the international club. So our school had
Yeah,
an international club of students from all different countries and also students that just were interested in other countries. Maybe there were some students that were like taking French class or taking Spanish
yeah,
class. And so they all had this international club and they'd do like an international dinner every year. I think they did a couple trips as well, and that helped get students involved in that. We also did in our classroom an international meal. Um, can't remember if we did that around Christmas or well, I don't know when we did it, but some time in the year when we had some free time, um, we did it like an international meal, and all students brought in different things from their cultures on different holidays. If there was a holiday that they would normally celebrate in their culture, we try to figure out when that is, like at the beginning of the school year, and then we could plan our calendar around that. So those would be days when we'd have little like, oh, it's, going to be this festival for this country. And so they could bring in something and
Yeah,
tell
that's
us
really
about that.
fun.
Yeah, it was super fun and it got some really great food out of it. And, yeah, so they love a lot of students love bringing in stuff from their cultures. And some of them have done presentations. I also had every student from different countries paint a ceiling tile. So my old classroom, I had ceiling tiles that you could paint. We could just take them down and paint them. That was like a thing that they did at the
Oh
high
yeah,
school.
that's so fun.
So I have a flag from every single different country that they had, of students I'd had. So I ended up with like, I think, close to 30 different flags of everywhere from Iraq to
Oh,
Mexico
wow.
to
Yeah.
Canada to Istanbul to, I mean, or I guess Turkey. I mean, every flag, and some of them I have multiple flags from some countries because students are like, oh, well, that other kid didn't quite do justice to this flag, or they wanted to do their area. I had one girl from two different students from Spain. One was from Barcelona, and she insisted on doing the Barcelona flag. So it was really cool. I got a Barcelona flag, and then I also got the Spanish flag. So that was
Nice.
something cool that a project that they could do, and then they could present it to the class and talk about it. It's really fun. So, and then also it's fun to introduce them to American culture too. So,
Yeah, sure.
like, we go on the field trips that we try to organize some field trips and just doing different presentations and talking to them and be like, what do you have something like this in your country? And because that's their point of reference, right? Is their experiences, and they might be able to tell you a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't know. So that was fun. We also like during the World Cup, the last World Cup, I had I guess it was over a year ago. I had two girls in my class, her sisters from Argentina. And so they
Okay.
were really excited about Argentina making it to the finals and winning the World Cup. And so we tried to talk about that. And most of my ELL students are soccer fans. So,
Nice.
try to do that when we can, watch some soccer in class, if you can figure that out on your screen or whatever. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of things you can do, but
Yeah.
those are some of the things I did. Um, Also, yeah, one last thing. I did mention, the students helping each other out, but that I would hit that again. Like, if you can find students that can be advocates for ELL students and be helpers to them.
Yes.
I had one student last year that he had learned Spanish on his own. He was just excited about Spanish and had become fluent
Yeah.
in it. And he would come and he was super helpful to some of the Spanish speaking students that were beginner level Spanish, and he could translate really well for them. So
Yeah.
that was a really helpful thing, finding students that are bilingual that can come in and help out the students with their stuff. They don't have to be bilingual either. Like students are just willing to take the time with other students, and a lot of students think it's fun. Like they think it's cool to
Yeah, they
have
do.
a friend from another country and introduce them to their friend.
Yeah, they do. I try to implement a good bit of peer review with their writing projects in my class, and really modeling for them how to do effective peer review and not just like, oh, hey, this is the wrong word, or oh, hey, this grammar is wrong, but like really coaching them to be good peers as far as like, hey, this is a really great idea. Maybe you should consider this more. And again, just getting them to focus on the content and ideas. And of course, it's great if they can help them out with some of their language and grammar as well. But for the most part, just teaching peers how to be like good, how to give good feedback is really important to them finding success in the classroom.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, how much time have we been doing this for?
Probably a lot longer than 10 minutes.
Yeah, we're gonna have to cut this down
Yeah, that's okay though.
a
It's
little
better to have
bit,
more
but that's
better
good.
to have more
That's a good
content than not
problem.
enough.
Hmm. I guess we need to wrap it up then.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we should make um to wrap it up, I'd say that there's so many different tools out there digitally now
Yes.
for ESL students or ELL students to use, from AI to translate to a million other things probably. And then also the one of the biggest tools that we have on hand in the classroom are the other students, the people in the classroom. So if we can get the students helping each other out, that's really, really important.
Of course.
Immerse them completely in English where they can talk to other students. And it's surprising how helpful students will be with that. And then for ourselves, just not assuming anything, like not assuming just because they're talking that they're perfectly fluent and their reading is good, right? Or just because they're turning in well-written essays that
Right.
they're able to communicate well speaking, or that they understand all the words, right? And just being conscious of where they're at and what help they need, and trying to get them the help that they need.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I know as a, as a first year teacher, um, that can be really overwhelming just to think about all of the different students you need to learn and where they're at and how to work with them. But again, just valuing each student individually for what they bring to the table, working with them, getting a plan together for how they can get better in reading and writing. And just kind of, again, like you said, caring and showing that attention to them will go a long way.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Cool.
Alrighty.
All right. So these will be like our show notes. We can send them with Dr. Gall's stuff recording now.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, and then once you kind of like, edit what we want and things like that, I can um, edit the show notes as well to be what actually